Peace be with you, Ivan. Welcome back to the series Exploring Divine Revelation. In previous episodes of our journey, we have taken a fascinating historical journey together, examining in depth the three major texts widely regarded as divine revelations: the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Bible. We have carefully examined their respective claims to historical reliability through the lenses of three key areas: manuscripts, documents, and archaeology. Today, in our seventh and final episode of this series, we will bring together these findings for a comprehensive summary. We will also specifically explore the important points raised by Dr. Wan Wai-yiu in his lecture, who dissected these complex texts from a rigorous academic perspective, but in a way that is accessible to the public, and led us to think about their authenticity as divine revelations. This is not only an academic analysis, but also an opportunity to invite you to think together and dig deeper into the foundations of your own beliefs. First, let's review our examination of the historical reliability of the Quran. As we have seen in previous episodes, while Islamic tradition insists that the Quran was fully codified and canonicalized in the 7th century, shortly after Muhammad's death, external evidence presents a number of thought-provoking challenges that give grounds for suspension of its reliability. One significant problem with the manuscript evidence is that Quran manuscripts from the 7th century, the time of Muhammad, are simply non-existent. Prior to 750 AD, we have virtually no verifiable Muslim texts that give us a glimpse into the formative years of Islam. The Muslim primary sources that do exist are in fact all dated 150 to 300 years later than the events they describe, and are therefore in a practical sense secondary sources. We have absolutely no evidence for an original Quranic text. Even though by the late 7th century, when the Islamic Empire had expanded from Spain to India, there should theoretically have been a large number of Quranic manuscripts in existence. In fact, there are none from that period. The earliest verifiable Quranic manuscript in existence dates from 790 AD. For example, the much-discussed Samarkand and Topkapi manuscripts, despite their age, are written in Kufic script. However, modern Quran manuscript experts such as Martin Lingus and Yassin Hamid Safadi point out that Kufic script did not appear until the late 8th century and was not used at all in Mecca and Medina in the 7th century. Early Muslim coins also show that Kufic script did not come into common use until after 750 AD. The landscape format used in these manuscripts is also similar to the format of Syrian and Iraqi Christian texts of the 8th and 9th centuries, rather than the upright format of early Arabic manuscripts. All of this points to the fact that these versions of the Quran were compiled later than traditionally claimed. The historicity of Mecca, the central city of the Quran, is also questioned in terms of documentary and archaeological evidence. Muslim tradition regards Mecca as the center of Islam and even the first and most important city in the world. However, apart from an ambiguous mention by the Roman-Egyptian geographer Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD, there is absolutely no mention of Mecca or its Kaaba in any authenticated ancient text until the early 8th century. This means that the hard evidence for Mecca's existence is a full 100 years later than Islamic tradition claims. Moreover, the claim that Mecca was an important trade center in the 7th century has been rigorously tested. Research has shown that Mecca was not on any major trade route at all. It was located in a barren area, more than 100 miles away from natural trade routes. International trade in the ancient Middle East had collapsed by the 3rd century AD, and there were no Roman markets to trade within Muhammad's time. What trade remained was controlled primarily by Ethiopians rather than Arabs, and the center of trade was Edurus on the Red Sea coast, not Mecca. Early Greek texts never even mention Mecca, only cities such as Taif and Yathrib, later Medina. This seriously challenges Mecca's status as an important city in Muhammad's time. The Qibla, the direction in which Muslims pray, is set in the Quran as Mecca, around 624 AD. However, archaeological evidence from early mosques contradicts this. Some mosques built in the 7th century, such as the Wayzat Mosque in Iraq, built in the early 8th century AD, and a mosque near Baghdad are not oriented towards Mecca, but 30 to 33 degrees north. The first mosque in Kufa, c. 670 AD, and the Amr Mosque in Fustat, Egypt, are also oriented to the north. Christian writer Jacob of Edessa, writing in 705 AD, also noted that the Arabs in Egypt prayed facing east, towards their Kaaba, which was not in the south. Dr. Hotting of the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London even noted that no 7th century mosques were found that faced Mecca, while some faced north, possibly towards Jerusalem. This strongly suggests that the finalization of the direction of prayer and the establishment of Mecca as a holy place may have occurred in the late 7th or even 8th century, not during Muhammad's lifetime. Muhammad's status has also been challenged in archaeological inscriptions. Yehuda Nevo's study of Arab rock inscriptions shows that in religious texts from the 1st century and a half of Arab rule, 7th-8th centuries, there is a monotheistic faith, but it is clearly not Islam. Before 691 AD, there is absolutely no mention of Muhammad or the statement Muhammad is the messenger of God in any inscription. The first clear record of this phrase is on a coin in 690 AD. The triple confession of faith that includes God as one, Muhammad is his prophet, and the humanity of Jesus first appears in an inscription on the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem in 691 AD. These findings suggest that Muhammad's status as the seal of the prophets was probably established during the late 7th century during the Marwan dynasty, rather than during his lifetime. The Quranic text itself may have undergone later editing and evolution. The Dome of the Rock inscription, while containing recognizable Quranic material, differs from the present-day Quranic text in terms of wording, variants, and omissions. This suggests that the transmission of the Quranic text evolved over the years. Dr. John Wansbrough notes that the Quran is remarkably lacking in overall structure, frequently vague and incoherent in language and content, and reuses whole passages from different versions. This suggests that the Quran may have been a slow and imperfect compilation of materials from multiple traditions, and that its appearance may have been a sudden and belated event. It is argued that the prototype of the Quran may not have been compiled until 705 AD by the Iraqi governor Hajjaj. Finally, the Quran's content contains stories from early Jewish and Christian apocryphal literature. Many of the Quran's stories have remarkable similarities to the Jewish Talmud and Christian apocryphal literature of the 2nd century AD. For example, the story of Cain and Abel, the story of Abraham and the idols, the story of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, the story of Mount Sinai being lifted up, and the story of the baby Jesus making a clay bird and speaking can all be found in these apocryphal texts that are considered heretical or non-authoritative by Orthodox Judaism and Christianity. The story of Muhammad's night ascension, Miraj, can also be traced back to a fictional book in Egypt in 200 BC, the Testament of Abraham and the Secret of Enoch. These apocryphal texts were not divinely inspired, but were created by rabbis and storytellers centuries later. Their discovery within the Quranic text makes the Quran's claim to be the final revelation highly questionable. The Quran's principle of abrogation also raises questions about its internal consistency. Although some scholars have tried to explain it as a misunderstanding, the principle allows previous verses to be superseded by later ones, which has led to contradictory interpretations of certain teachings in the Quran, such as peace and violence. Unlike the progressive revelation of faith understanding in the Bible, changes in the Quran seem to be more influenced by changes in environment and Muhammad's personal identity. Next, let's turn our attention to the Book of Mormon. Similar to the Quran, the Book of Mormon also claims to be a direct revelation from God, but its historical reliability faces more serious challenges, especially in terms of the lack of ancient manuscripts, documents, and archaeological evidence. In terms of manuscripts and documents, the Book of Mormon has no ancient copies. Unlike the Bible, it lacks any manuscript evidence dating back to the historical period it claims to have. The events of the Book of Mormon are said to end in 400 AD, but its earliest documentary traces do not exist until 1830, with a gap of 1,400 years. This huge time gap strongly suggests that the Book of Mormon may have been constructed in the 19th century. In terms of archaeological evidence, the ancient civilizations, people, places, and events in North or South America described in the Book of Mormon also lack any archaeological support. The Book of Mormon details more than 30 major cities such as Nephi, Manti, Zarahemla, Sidon, etc. However, archaeologists have not found any evidence related to Zarahemla. Experts point out that if an empire as vast as the one described in the Book of Mormon existed, it would have been impossible not to leave any archaeological traces. Despite millions of dollars invested in finding evidence, Thomas Stewart Ferguson, a Mormon scholar who worked to prove the Book of Mormon, ultimately found contradictions rather than confirmations. "I have searched all my life, but I have found nothing. I am disappointed," he wrote before his death. The Book of Mormon also describes the existence of many animals in the Americas at the time, such as cattle, donkeys, horses, goats, sheep, and elephants, and even large-scale wars with horse-drawn chariots. However, archaeologists found turkeys, llamas, and dogs, as well as corn, beans, and pumpkins. They found no wheat, no cattle, sheep, goats, no horses, no elephants in the Book of Mormon's time. The Mayan civilization did not even have pack animals, and horses were not introduced to the Americas until the arrival of Europeans in the 17th century. This makes the Book of Mormon's record of horseback warfare contradict historical archaeological facts. As for metallurgy, the Book of Mormon claims that the Jaredite and Nephite worked various ores such as gold, silver, and copper, and used steel weapons and armor. However, archaeologists say that no sites have been found that prove the smelting of steel, and that the Maya civilization did not use metal at all. The Book of Mormon also mentions the use of metal coins as currency. However, metal coins were never used in the Americas before the arrival of Europeans. The Book of Mormon also describes massive wars that killed millions of people. For example, Ether 15 records a war that resulted in the deaths of millions of warriors. Mormon chapter 8, verse 2, also mentions a great and terrible battle at Mount Cumorah, which resulted in the utter annihilation of the Nephite, with a death toll of at least 230,000. However, no mass burial sites, human remains, steel swords, or chariot parts were found. Interestingly, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, owns much of Mount Cumorah, but they have not conducted archaeological excavations at the mountain because they know that to do so would only disprove their claims of faith. In terms of internal textual issues, the Book of Mormon is riddled with significant textual discrepancies and anachronisms. The Book of Mormon claims to be a direct translation from the gold plates and should be absolutely accurate. However, there are hundreds of changes between its first edition, 1830, and later editions, totaling over 400. These changes include obvious grammatical errors, such as "were easy to got them" or "they was angry with me," which sound more like 19th century English than an ancient text from divine revelation. The Book of Mormon also claims that the Nephite wrote in Reformed Egyptian. But linguists say it is a fictional language that does not exist. There are also anachronisms in the text, such as the mention of Christians hundreds of years before Christ was born, but the word Christ itself is Greek, and the concept of Christian did not appear until after Jesus. The Book of Mormon also has incredible physiological fallacies. For example, the Book of Ether describes a beheaded general who was able to continue struggling, standing and breathing after losing his head. This is completely inconsistent with common sense of human physiology. In addition, the description of human skin color in the Book of Mormon, such as the Lamanite becoming black-skinned because of their disobedience, is also considered to reflect 19th century racial prejudice rather than eternal divine truth. In terms of prophecy, there are also failed cases in the Book of Mormon. For example, Joseph Smith predicted that David Patton would go on a mission the following spring. However, less than half a year later, Patton died in battle in October 1838 and failed to fulfill the prophecy. These have posed serious challenges to the authority of the Book of Mormon as a divine revelation. Now, let's look at the evidence for the Bible. In stark contrast to the challenges faced by the Quran and the Book of Mormon, the Bible has extremely solid support in terms of manuscript, documentary, and archaeological evidence. In terms of manuscript evidence, the New Testament has a large number of early manuscripts and a stable textual transmission. There are more than 5,300 extant Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, 10,000 Latin Vulgates, and 9,300 other early translations, totaling more than 24,000 New Testament manuscripts or fragments. Of these, 230 manuscripts are dated before 600 AD. This rich number of documents allows us to reconstruct the content of the original text with great accuracy, with almost nothing lost in the process of transmission. The text of the Bible is even better than other classical literary works. For example, Shakespeare's works 300 years ago did not have so many manuscripts to refer to. What's more, many New Testament manuscripts are dated very close to the time of original writing. For example, the Papyrus of the Gospel of John, P52, in the John Rylands Library dates to 120 AD. New research has found that a fragment of Mark's Gospel, from the Qumran caves, dates to before 68 AD, meaning it was written within 35 years of Christ's death, when eyewitnesses to the events may have been alive. The most significant discovery is the Magdalene manuscript fragment of Matthew 26, which Dr. Karsten Tita has used sophisticated analysis to date to no later than 65-66 AD, and possibly earlier. This suggests it could be part of Matthew's original manuscript, or a copy made in the moment while Matthew and other disciples and eyewitnesses were still alive. The use of the abbreviations for the sacred names, nomina sacra, such as IS, Jesus, and KE, Lord, in this fragment of Matthew suggests that Jesus' divinity was recognized hundreds of years before the Council of Nicaea established official doctrine in 325 AD. In addition to the large number of manuscripts, there are more than 15,000 extant translations in Syriac, Coptic, Armenian, Gothic, and others, some as early as 150 AD. Christianity was a missionary faith from the beginning, and the scriptures were immediately translated into the known languages of the time. The existence of so many translations proves its authenticity, because if the disciples or later followers wanted to tamper with or forge the content, it would be an almost impossible task to unify all the translations. In addition, 2,135 lectionaries of liturgical texts from the 6th century and a large number of quotations in the letters of the early Church Fathers further support the authority of the Bible. Dean Bergen's research found 86,489 quotations from the early Church Fathers. J. Harold Greenlee pointed out that the biblical quotations in the works of the early Church Fathers are so extensive that the New Testament can be reconstructed almost without the New Testament manuscripts. Sir David Dalrymple discovered almost the entire New Testament except for 11 verses from the writings of the Church Fathers in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The reliability of the Old Testament is also confirmed. The astonishing discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, written c. 125 BC, proved them to be nearly identical to the Masoretic text, 916 AD, save for minor copying errors, and more than 1,000 years older. The Septuagint, translated c. 150 to 200 BC, provided further evidence. In terms of external documentary and archaeological evidence, many of the historical people, places, and events recorded in the Bible have been confirmed by numerous external documentary and archaeological discoveries. In response to skeptics who had claimed that Moses could not have written the Pentateuch, the discovery of the Black Stone of the Code of Hammurabi, 300 years before Moses, confirmed the existence of early writing. The Hittites, once believed by historians to be non-existent, have been shown to have existed for 1,200 years, much of which coincides with the period of the biblical patriarchs. The Horites have also been found to be a warrior group in Mesopotamia. The Age of Abraham and the Patriarchs. Abraham's name appears in Babylonia. The Egyptian pharaoh Shishak inscribed the Fields of Abraham in Hebron on the wall of the Temple of Karnak in 918 BC, proving that Abraham was known in Palestine rather than in Arabia. The Ebla tablets, 2300 BC, record laws and customs similar to those in Deuteronomy and list the cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zor in the exact order of Genesis 14 verse 8. The Mari tablets mention King Arayuk/Arioch of Genesis 14 and place names such as Nahor and Haran. The Nuzi tablets confirm several customs mentioned in the Pentateuch. Joseph. The price of Joseph as a slave, 20 shekels, Genesis 37 verse 28, matches trade records from 1700 BC. Joseph's tomb was probably found in Shechem, containing a mummy and the sword of an Egyptian official. Jericho. Archaeological excavations show that the walls collapsed outward, Joshua 6 verse 20, contrary to the laws of physics that walls usually collapse inward, suggesting that the author may have been an eyewitness. David. When David captured Jerusalem, Joab used the Jebusite-built waterways for a surprise attack, 2 Samuel 5 verses 6 to 8, which have been discovered by archaeological excavations. Daniel. East Indian inscriptions from the 6th century BC confirm Nebuchadnezzar's construction, Daniel 4 verse 30, suggesting that the author of Daniel was an eyewitness of the period. The Cyrus cylinder explains Cyrus' policy of allowing the exiles to return home, echoing Ezra 1 verses 1 to 3. New Testament people and events. Luke's reference to Erastus, the Corinthian finance minister, Romans 16 verse 23, is confirmed by paving stones discovered in 1929. Luke's reference to Quirinius as governor of Syria, at the time of Jesus' birth, is also confirmed by the Antioch inscription. Luke's use of the term politarchs to refer to the civil officials of Thessalonica, Acts 17 verse 6, is confirmed by 19 inscriptions, 5 of which are from Thessalonica. Crucially, Luke's reference to Gallio as proconsul, Acts 18 verse 12, has been questioned, but the Delphi inscription of 52 AD confirms that Gallio did serve as proconsul of Achaia, and only for 1 year. This not only confirms the historicity of Acts, but also dates it precisely to around 52 AD, proving that the author wrote at the time of the events or shortly thereafter. F. Bruce thus asserts that where Luke was suspected of being inaccurate, his accuracy has been confirmed by epigraphic evidence, and it can be said that archaeology has confirmed the New Testament account. Hostile accounts, even the enemies of Christianity, the Jewish and Roman authorities, did not deny the early Christian claims regarding events such as Jesus' resurrection, but attempted to offer alternative explanations. Accounts by secular historians such as Thallus, 52 AD, Tacitus, 80 to 84 AD, Josephus, 90 to 95 AD, Suetonius, and Pliny the Younger, 112 AD, all confirm key events in the Bible, especially the crucifixion of Jesus, which is denied by the Quran, Surah 4:157. In terms of prophecy, the Bible contains a large number of fulfilled prophecies. For example, the Old Testament's Isaiah 53 accurately predicted the crucifixion of Jesus, which was fulfilled in Jesus hundreds of years later. This ability to predict future events and have them actually fulfilled in history is considered a supernatural mark of divine revelation because it is beyond human foreknowledge. Core message coherence. Although the Bible was written by about 40 authors over a period of 1,500 years from a variety of social backgrounds and eras, it was written on 3 continents, Asia, Africa, Europe, in 3 languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek. Despite covering hundreds of controversial topics, the authors maintain harmony and coherence in the theme of the unfolding story of God's redemption of humanity from Genesis to Revelation. This internal consistency is in stark contrast to other scriptures that claim to be divine inspiration. A key point of debate in evaluating the claims of these sacred texts is the concept of final revelation and their fundamentally different views of Jesus. First, just because a scripture appeared later does not automatically mean it is more final or more correct. In the field of science, later theories can correct or replace previous knowledge, but this logic does not apply to divine revelation that deals with deep issues of human nature. To correct or replace existing revelations, stronger evidence is required. The views of these three scriptures on Jesus reflect the most core theological differences between them. The Bible clearly states that Jesus is the Son of God, has divinity, and is the key to the salvation of mankind. His crucifixion and resurrection are the cornerstones of the Christian faith. The Quran, on the other hand, regards Jesus as an important prophet, but not divine. The Quran denies the historical fact that Jesus was crucified, Quran 4:157, which directly contradicts the biblical account. Although the Book of Mormon is similar to the Bible in some aspects and also claims that Jesus has divinity, it is unique in that it claims that Jesus appeared to people in the Americas after his resurrection. However, the available evidence shows this claim to be absurd and without any evidence to support it. Mormon prophet Gordon B. Hinckley even admitted that Mormons do not believe in the Christ of traditional Christianity. This shows that the Book of Mormon presents a different Jesus and a different gospel. These fundamental differences about Jesus' identity, crucifixion, and redemption are not only doctrinal disagreements, but also core doubts about their authenticity as divine revelations. Dr. Milton Wan conducted an in-depth examination of the historical and external evidence for the three classics in his lecture and presented his concluding remarks. Regarding the Quran, Dr. Wan pointed out that the evidence presented does give us reason for pause regarding its reliability. This means that from the lack of manuscripts, the controversy over Meccan history, the change of the direction, to the period when Muhammad's status was established that did not match the inscriptions, and the appearance of apocryphal stories in the text content, the Quran as a historical evidence of divine revelation has problems that need to be deeply thought about and explained. Regarding the Book of Mormon, Dr. Wen's view is more direct. He believes that there are too many doubts about the Book of Mormon, such as the lack of ancient manuscripts, the lack of archaeological evidence of civilization on the American continent, contradictions and physiological errors within the text, and the failure of prophecy. These problems make it impossible for him to accept its claim to be divine revelation. As for the Bible, Dr. Milton Wan clearly stated that from an objective perspective, if we compare the three scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, and the Book of Mormon, using the different standards he proposed earlier, he personally believes that in terms of history and content, we believe that if we have to choose one of the three scriptures, I will choose the Bible. But he also emphasized that this does not mean that the other two scriptures are useless or that the two religions are completely wrong. The meaning of this Chinese paragraph is that Dr. Wen believes that from an objective perspective, if we use the standards discussed earlier to compare the three scriptures, he will find that the Bible provides stronger support in all aspects, whether it is history or content. He even mentioned that if he can only choose one scripture, he will choose the Bible. This does not mean that other religions are completely wrong or useless, but in terms of the historical evidence of their divine revelation, the Bible provides a more solid foundation. Dear readers, our goal in this series is to provide an objective perspective to help you evaluate these texts that claim to be divinely inspired. This is a complex task because it involves standards that go beyond personal faith commitments and requires external critical analysis. Although faith is essentially a subjective personal choice, examining its historical evidence is undoubtedly an important objective way to evaluate it. Based on the sources we have reviewed, the conclusion tends to be that the Bible provides a more solid foundation for its claim to divine inspiration in terms of historical and external evidence. Every new archaeological discovery and documentary research continues to confirm the accuracy of the biblical record. At the same time, these sources also recognize that other religions may have value in other aspects. For example, Islam has a positive impact on its believers in terms of lifestyle, family values, and moral consciousness. Mormons' lifestyle and respect for family are also worthy of recognition. However, the sources emphasize that these values do not equate to their scriptures automatically possessing the authority of divine revelation. The standard for measuring divine revelation needs to go beyond emotions and subjective impressions and return to the depth, accuracy, consistency, and supernatural imprint of the text itself, especially the fulfillment of prophecy. Ultimately, this series of discussions is to guide you to continue to study these contents in depth and really think about these issues. As a wise truth seeker, we should have the courage to ask questions, be honest with the evidence, and make our own judgments. Thank you for watching this series, and I hope it will be a helpful starting point in your personal journey of seeking truth. This is really an interesting topic, and it is worth our further study. Thank you for your support. I hope you can subscribe, turn on notifications, and share to support this channel to continue. To learn more, join my Patreon. There is a text version in the member area. Let us know God, think about faith, and live out Christ together. Goodbye.